Hey, how's it going? My name is Matthew, aka EasyBot, and today I'm going to show you how to build a delay riser on the Octatrack. This is a fantastic high-energy transitional effect. You can use it to move from part to part within a song, to move into a brand new pattern, or to move to a new song altogether. It does take a bit of work to set up, and you do need to understand some key concepts in the Octatrack, all of which I'm going to go over during this tutorial. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of building this effect, let's have a listen to it to see if it's something you even want to do. Here's a few examples of different types of music using the delay riser effect. Start it right now. I'm going to bring in some hi-hats while it's doing its effect. And that's it. It's one of those effects that's going to work on any kind of music that you have as it's synced to your master clock, in my case the Octatrack, and also it uses your existing audio to create the effect. So any kind of music that you feed into it is going to have this sense of build, and it's going to reuse your timbre to make the riser, which I think is fantastic. I mean, that's how delays work in general. There are some effects that can really taint your sound and seem to be for specific genres, and I feel like this effect works in any genre. All right, so we have to talk about a few things before we get started. For one, I'm processing my external gear, so I don't want to use the mixer because the mixer doesn't allow me to place effects on the mixer. You can only place effects on your master track if I do this, and I'm not using a master track, and we're not going to be using one for this effect. So we need through machines. Before we start changing our machines, let's change the scaling on our Octatrack. I want all of my tracks to have their own scaling. I think that's how it should be by default. It's not how it is, but that's what we're going to change real quick. So I'm going to go Function, Pattern Settings, use the right arrow down, hit yes to per track. Then we're going to go over to our scaling on track 1, and we're first going to change our master to 64. I usually work in 8 bars, so I would change it to 128 for sake of this tutorial and for the sake of our brains. We're just going to work in 4 bars. I then am going to change this to make the track be 4 bars long. We're going to do the same thing on track 5. This side of the Octatrack is going to represent A and B, or our percussion side. This side of the Octatrack is going to represent our melodic side, and that's how we're going to work moving forward through this tutorial. However, you can do whatever you like. This effect will work if you do it your own way as well, as long as you follow the settings. This is just how I like to set up my Octatrack, and is how my ultimate Octatrack effects template is set up. This effect is one of 64 effects that you'll find in my template. I have links for that below if you want to grab it and not go through the hassle of building it yourself, but continue to watch this video anyway so you can at least understand how it's functioning. So let's go ahead and make this 4 bars long as well, and let's change these tracks to through tracks. Double press source, select through. Go over here, select through. I'm just going to do them both at the same time for sake of simplicity and to make it go faster. Go back over to track 1. I'm going to put down a playback trig on step 1 of 64 steps. Same thing on track 5. Hit play, and now these through machines function. We do need to tell them what source to listen to. So on this side, we're going to choose AB. I'm going to bring the volume up to plus 63. That adds 12 dB exactly to the audio coming in, which is what the Octatrack is removing as audio comes in to give it some headroom. I just think it works fine with the plus 12 dB so that I can get my audio back to what it would sound like had I plugged headphones directly into my Digitakt, Digitonal, or Syntakt. We'll do the same thing over here, but for C and D, and also plus 63. I do want to change the track level to 127. Anything below 127 in the Octatrack is an attenuation of the volume, so it's not unity until this is at 127. Keep that in mind moving forward with your Octatrack in general. So now these are set up, I should be able to hear my Digitact, my Digatone, and my Syntacct. And I can. So I do want this to be the master clock and telling these machines what to do. So I'm gonna go function MIDI, and we're gonna change the MIDI settings for the Octatrack. I'm gonna go transport yes, clock yes, and send yes, and change the channel from auto, which is totally useless for program change, and have it select to the channel that I had set up on these machines, which for me is channel 10. So now when I hit play, all these machines are gonna play at the tempo the Octatrack has it set to. I'm gonna actually change this to 130 because I know that's what this track is supposed to be at. And now we can hear the music. Cool, sounds good, I think. So now let's get started with the effect. We are gonna use a neighbor track after our through track on both buses. So on the percussion side and on the melody side. In my template, I actually go through track, neighbor track, and then I use a flex track here for loopers. We're not gonna go through all that rigmarole. We're just gonna do one through track, one neighbor track, because that's really all you need to complete this effect. So I am gonna go to track 2, and go to source, and select neighbor track. Neighbor tracks process the audio from the track above it. It just adds 2 more insert effects, and you also get access to its LFO and sequencer for sequencing effects or for retriggering LFOs or envelopes. Do the same thing on track 6, and select a neighbor track. I want the track level at 127 here too. Again, I just want to keep everything at unity. So by default, neighbor tracks and all tracks come with a filter and a delay on the Octatrack. This is actually really good for us because these are all the effects we need. We actually don't need to change out any of the effects if we don't want to. All we're going to be using is a delay here, a filter, and another delay. A delay here, a filter, and another delay. So let's go ahead and go to Effects 2. We're going to double press this and go into its secondary menu settings. This is because we're going to turn this delay into a freeze delay and or a beat repeat. I actually have the delay control set up on the keyboard here, which is function plus down, and it brings up the delay control, which you can actually trigger these delays. These green buttons here represent tracks that have delays on them. Every track has a delay on it by default in the Octatrack. So until you change it, this is how it will work. However, only these 2 are going to do anything. This represents track 1 and or side A for us, and this represents track 5 and or side C and D for us. This is important to know that once we have this effect going, we'll also be able to use the beat repeats. Double freaking whammy. Let's go into the secondary settings on Effects 2, and we want to turn lock on and turn tape off. We then want to turn the feedback to 127 so that the audio stays at full volume while it's being beat repeated. We also want to bring our send up to 127. You only have to bring the send up past 0 for a freeze delay to function. At 0, freeze delays turn on. So if there's no audio coming in, you have it at 0, you're just gonna get silence. So if you're wondering why your machines just went dead silent, that's because you haven't brought your send up. And the reason we're bringing the send all the way up to 127 is because think of it like this. I'm actually gonna mute side A here so that we have more of a dry wet mix. Here's 0, there's 127. So I want the freeze delay to initiate as it reaches the end of my crossfade, the very end of the crossfade. So when it can't go any further, that's when the freeze delay will start. It'll also give us an opportunity to filter along the way so we get some nice sounds before it hits that freeze delay. This is a great opportunity for you to play with time in your music. You can actually time all this stuff to create some really cool effects and take advantage of different moments within the delay riser. So now we have these settings set up. These settings in the secondary menu, these settings in the main menu. Let's go over to side C and D and do the same thing. So feedback 127, send 127, and turn lock on and tape off. When you have a tape delay and you adjust the time during a delay's actual live feedback, it will make some pitch changes. With a digital delay, which is the other way of using the delay when you have tape off, it doesn't make those pitch changes. It actually makes some more gnarly sounds that aren't usable at all. The pitch changes might actually be more usable. For the way that we're using the delays, this won't be a problem as it won't even initiate the delay until this time has reached the level that we want it to be at. Once the delay stops, the time won't matter anymore because the freeze delays will be over. So it actually will sound perfect. That's why we want to use a digital delay and not the tape delay. So at this point we have 2 freeze delays. So I can hit play and play with these freeze delay buffers here. I could do them separately. So this is just the drums, or just the melodic side. Which is a whole lot of fun all in itself. Not great for techno maybe, but just fun in general. But this still isn't what we're after. We're trying to make the delay riser. So let's keep going. Right now I want to use scene B. We're going to choose a scene. I'm going to use number 4 because this is what this effect represents in my template. We're going to go into side B, scene 4. We're on track 1 looking at our freeze delay, and we're going to lock the send at 0 and the time at 128. 128 is 8 steps in your sequence, so half of a bar. This is the maximum amount of time that you can freeze in a freeze delay. We're going to do the same thing on track 5, 128, send at 0. So now we have this. We now have a perfect half of a bar freeze delay. This alone is already something really fun to play with, but we're gonna go a little bit further with it. We're gonna now run these sides into their own filter settings, and we're gonna use LFO ramps to control those filter settings over 4 bars. So on our neighbor tracks, we have to make sure that the scaling for these neighbor tracks is also 4 bars long. So let's do it on both neighbor tracks. So now both neighbor tracks are 4 bars long. And I'm gonna put down a red trigger here, or a playback trigger, even though there's no samples on either of these tracks. I could put down a green trigger by holding function and placing it on the sequencer and then holding that trigger and hitting no, and it makes it bright green, and this is a trigless trig. This bright green trigger and the red trig are the only 2 triggers. Well, I guess a one-shot trigger can do it too, but as far as not one-shot triggers, these are the only 2 triggers that will reset LFOs and or trigger envelopes such as the amp envelope or the filter envelope, because there's an envelope built into your filter and of course one built into your amplifier. So we're gonna do that for both of these. I'm actually just gonna use a red playback trig on both of these. And we're gonna go into our filter on track 2. So the filter that's filtering side AB, or our percussion side. And I'm gonna set that filter to 64, 14, and the resonance I'm gonna set to 40. It's also important to know that you can change how your filter works. You double press it, go into the secondary menu. You can change it from a 12 dB filter to a 24 dB filter, which is what the 303 filter is set to. And the Octatrack does a great job of doing the 303 sound if you want. It is also important to know that we have the Q going to both. What that means is that the Q is going to go to the frequency emphasis on the high pass, so where the high pass is being cut off, and on the low pass. So it's going to create this kind of smile as the resonance is brought up. So it makes a really cool sound, and I love using that effect as much as possible. I rarely ever turn off Q to both in the Octatrack. So now we have our filter set up like this. We don't have our LFO going yet, but let's just have a listen to how this sounds. I think it's a very nice, subtle filter sound. You still kind of get the clunks of the percussion, but they're muted quite a bit. Next thing we need to do is go into our LFO so we can actually have this filter open up over 4 bars. So this is an effect that you want initiated at the beginning of 4 bars. You can start it at any time during your performance, but it'll have the full effect if you trigger it right at step 1. So this is something you want to try and time. So we're going to go into our LFO. We're going to set it to the filter width, which is the low pass filter. I want the wave to be a ramp. Multiplier set to 1. The trig set to trig, meaning the LFO's phase will be reset at the beginning of our sequence because of that trigger that we put down, that red one. We talked about that. And then we want the speed to be at 16. And then for the depth, we're going to, actually let's lock in the speed too while we're at it, just so it can't get messed up. The depth, we're gonna have it at about 50. So now let's have a listen to the effect. So you can hear it building up already. It's gonna reset. So it's resetting every 4 bars. When we combine this with a delay, we're gonna pretty much already be there. It's gonna be the effect that we want. There's a little bit more work. We're gonna do some more settings on the melodic side, but it's the drums that really make this effect sound good. So let's go ahead and move over to our delay. Let's just set the delay at a default setting of 80. We can lock that into the effect as well. And bring up the send to about 80. And here we go. I brought in a bunch of elements right here, so let's take some sounds out. Okay. We're gonna do the riser, even though it's not fully completed. Here we go, let's bring in those sounds. You can already hear how effective this effect is. How effective this effect is. Effective. Go ahead and go over to the other side now. So on this side, what we need to do is go into our filter settings once again. We're going to adjust the filter for the melodic side, which will have some completely different filter settings than we had for the drums. That's why I like to split these elements, is because I don't want an overall filter for the entire mix. I would like to filter my drums specifically. I would like to filter my melody specifically. And building out this effect on your Octatrack in this manner allows you to filter and delay things with their own timings, which will become very useful if you make variations of this effect, which is so easy to do. You just hold the scene, copy it, go to another one, paste it, and now start adjusting it to make another version of this effect. So for side C and D and or the melody side, let's change our filter settings. On this side, our filter is gonna go 60, 10, and 40. We're then gonna do the same thing that we did with our LFO on the other side. It's very effective for this effect. Effectus. Okay, here we go. Into the LFO settings, and let's set it to the filter width. Again, for a ramp. If you wanted this to take elements out, you would just invert the ramp, and it would get more of a darker sound. Instead of opening the filter, it would close the filter. But we don't want to do that. Set it to trig, speed to 16, and the depth here is going to be 54. That's it. That's the end of the effect. We could, however, add another neighbor track and give it chorus, which I do like to do, or we could run it into a reverb, which can sound fantastic as well, or we could use this other delay and just have it make some additional sounds so that the effect is a little bit bigger. So we could turn up the feedback here. I like 80 as a default for the feedback on the delays because it's not too overwhelming, and maybe we'll just use the filter width here. What's going to happen is that each delay, as it happens, is going to get filtered more and more so that the filter delays aren't going to be so overwhelming. We maybe actually want to add some bass to it too, so it doesn't get too bassy, because we are going to be using this effect on our bass lines and our chord stabs and all that that's happening on this side of the machine. And let's turn up the send. Not as much as the other side. And let's have a listen. I'm going to wait 4 bars so we can start it at the 1. Bring elements out. So instead of it having a build up into a more energized part of the song, we can actually rise into a drop, which I think works really well. We can go right back to it. So that's what it sounds like if you started at the middle of your pattern. So it is the most effective to start at least around the beginning of the first bar. Even right here, it sounds great. Again, we have these freeze delays. Not a great thing to do during a techno track, but it's still a lot of fun. That's it. That's the delay riser, or more lovingly known as the Circo riser. The reason we call it that is because Eric asked me for an effect that would freeze the audio and also delay, and this is what I came up with. It's not the same as the original effect from my classic performance template. This new one that I've made that I just shared with you is a little bit more complex and I think sounds a bit better than my old one. I hope you enjoy it. If you want to get your hands on this effect without having to build it yourself, you can visit patreon.com/EasyBot, where I share my performance templates and all the different variations of them that I have, and there are quite a few at this point in time. Or you can visit ko-fi.com/EasyBot and just buy it for yourself. Or you can use this video, the one you just watched, and build it yourself in your Octatrack at home. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.